World fights COVID-19. Lesotho, on the other hand, has been contending with a political battle there too. Now, the country has sworn in a new prime minister and cabinet, and the question now is, can the mountainous kingdom focus on the fight against COVID-19, and what plans are in place to curb its negative effects? Speaking to me now about this is former Statistician-General of South Africa, Pali Lehohla. Thabo Mdluli, good evening and thank you for your time.
Good evening, Dade, and how are you?
I'm very well in this time, and I hope you're keeping well too.
I'm trying to stay home and being safe.
Indeed, that is the correct response.
In that age, that is risky.
Let's talk then about the last nation in the African continent to be afflicted by the coronavirus, the nation of Lesotho, now reporting 2 cases from the movement of those 256 from South Africa, plus that visit to Saudi Arabia that has caused this pandemic now or rather this virus to get into that part of the country. Talk to me about the capacity to test, right? The Prime Minister, after being sworn in of Lesotho, saying it's only 2 months ago that actually I was hearing of a lab being established, and it's quite sad that right now there is no such capacity from within Lesotho. How ready is that nation for testing?
It's very difficult for me to comment on readiness or otherwise, except that we, the Basotho people in South Africa and friends across the world and in South Africa, under the Queen Mamhato's Trust, we formed what is called COVID-19 Obe Lesotho, naming it after this mysterious animal that would snatch people in the night and go with them. And this is a new Obe COVID-19. Regarding the capacity, therefore, to test, our thoughts and contribution is that we could, through raising funds and contributions, we can lend a hand in ensuring that testing actually occurs. Obviously, Lesotho has only one neighbor, which is South Africa, and movement between these 2 countries obviously has always been there. It continues under restricted conditions, but an outbreak of coronavirus in South Africa will affect Lesotho and vice versa, especially when the borders for economic activity have been opened with a lot of Basotho men working on the mines of South Africa. So it's inevitable that coronavirus will ultimately reach Lesotho. 2 people now, I think many more as the winter comes.
Are you worried at all that there are some undetected nationals who made their way in and out, illegally crossing, and hence, of course, we are seeing some of these reports coming through?
Well, the borders are rather porous, and the question of testing and screening is very difficult. And you can imagine when that happens at the border, it's very difficult to try and say whether I've screened you or tested you. These require very, very carefully designed systems. And the border gates are the least equipped to handle that, let alone crossing through the rivers. It can't happen. So indeed, Lesotho shares one border with South Africa. So whatever happens in South Africa will happen in Lesotho. And we also know that the testing and screening doesn't reflect the general situation in the population. It just reflects for those who have been tested, suspecting that they may have developed symptoms, and those that are tested as a consequence of a deliberate process. But that is not representative in the sense of generalizations in the country. So the reports that we get are a fraction, a very small fraction of the prevalence of this. So yes, testing is important to understand the progression and evolution, but testing doesn't tell you the prevalence in the general population, both here in South Africa, in Lesotho, or indeed worldwide. But in Lesotho, I think without testing, it will not understand the progression or evolution of the disease.
In terms of that and the prevention methods that have been used worldwide would be one, educating the nation on the washing of hands and proper hygiene practices. But the second method that has been used, of course, is this thing called a lockdown, where the economy is locked and there is no movement. And the impact then becomes really demonstrable in the economy, in the industry, as well as economic activity. How severe is that situation as far as job losses and the social needs?
Well, it's quite clear that lockdown will reduce and or remove economic activity altogether, with some industries closing forever and very few coming up, and new ones actually establishing. You can imagine that impact in a country which is solely dependent on South Africa largely, then the effects will be quite devastating. Of course, Lesotho has lifted the lockdown universally. Well, economic activity will come back. But whether they can actually manage the spike in the pandemic and the required infrastructure for treating people, it's a big question. Here in South Africa, the lockdown has been there, preparations have been made. Even then, when this spikes, it's still going to cause a lot of problems.
And as far as social relief, we have seen some nations, South Africa, in fact, 500 billion in stimulus package. Botswana is speaking of 5 billion pula as well that has been put into the system. What has Lesotho done?
Well, as I said, I'm not very sure. I mean, Lesotho has been embroiled in a lot of trouble over a period of time. Incidentally, His Majesty, the King Moshoeshoe I, loved peace so much that he even named, he said his sister is peace. But the country has not known peace all the time through the Rifakani, and now as we go into another administration that has just been inaugurated, I think it's a serious problem, and I don't think Lesotho got enough time to focus on this obvious Tlabucha, and I hope that they can focus on that very, very carefully so that Lesotho is not swallowed by this obey.